Let me start by saying, if you are going to be the person that's going to go into the comments and say, just learn how to freehand, I'm going to delete it. It's not helpful. It's very condescending to a lot of people, especially newer woodworkers. I know how to freehand. I have been woodworking for a while. I still use a jig because sometimes it's nice to have a jig. It's handy to have a jig, and there is nothing wrong with that. Stop worrying about how people sharpen their iron. Stop worrying about what method people use to woodwork. You should be more about have fun and encourage them. That's it. Don't just go into the comments and say you're wasting money, learn how to freehand, because again, I still use a jig. I've been doing this for a while, and I can freehand. So, don't be that guy. Now that that's over, I wanted to do a quick video that just shows you the different sharpening jigs and sharpening guides that Veritas has to offer. So we have the side clamping honing guide. We have the Mark II or the MK2, these pieces right here. This includes like the deluxe. So it has the top clamping, the side clamping, the camber roller, the flat roller, and then this is the registration jig. Then this one they just call their sharpening system with the registration jig as well. Price-wise, so the side clamping comes in at $46.50. The deluxe kit for the Mark II comes in at $139. The sharpening system comes in at $56.90. For the Mark II, you have options you can include. So this is the Mortice Chisel adapter, that's $11.50. You have the Skew registration jig, that's $37.50. Max capacity, which means how wide of an iron can these hold. All of them will hold the low angle jack plate irons that are 2 1/4. But if you're curious, the side clamping can hold up to 2.5 inches. The Mark II in the top clamping can hold up to 2 7/8. In the side clamping, it can hold up to 1.5. The sharpening system can hold 2 3/8. Now when it comes to the smallest irons that it can hold, so this is a 1/8 chisel. This is the one that I use to test all of these out. I do not recommend a 1/8 chisel into this one because of the shape of the chisel and how tall it is. You don't have a lot to clamp down onto. We'll dive into a couple more details about that later, but the side clamping, their website says that it can hold a 1/8 chisel just fine. Now, for this chisel, it can. I've tried other chisels before, and it didn't hold it super well. You kind of had to try to hold it yourself because it was a little bit loose depending on the angle of the sides of your chisel, how steep that angle is, how shallow it is. That makes a difference when it comes to the side clamping in a narrow chisel. The Mark II, kind of the same thing. It held this one really well. Other ones, they tended to rock and slip a little bit. So 1/8 chisels, what you could do is put painter's tape on the sides. If you put painter's tape on the sides and then clamp them into the side ones, it's going to hold a lot better. I still do not recommend it for this. This one I would say maybe a 1/4 inch would be the smallest that it could go, but it's a little finicky. So to talk about that a little bit, when it comes to squaring the irons, like keeping everything square, these two do it for you. When it comes to the side clamping, it clamps this way, like that. So it squares it up for you. The side clamping this way clamps like that, so it squares it up for you. This one, even though it's top clamping, they have this registration jig where you put your iron along here and it squares it up by pushing it along here. Okay, so these two you don't have to worry about keeping your iron square. I have heard that some people have had issues with this one and keeping their iron square. Keep an eye on your pressure, how much pressure you're putting on both sides, because that's going to make a difference. If you do see that it's the jig and it's not you, definitely reach out to their customer service. For this one, now when you go online, it says that there are lines in here that help you make things square because you can eyeball it and line it up with that. Every one that I've seen has this pad on here that gives you grip when you have whatever clamped in on there. It grips it down for you so I can't see the lines. So this one, to me, is really tough to keep square unless you're going to somehow line it up with the sides and then just have the iron off center, which is what I don't recommend. If your iron is square and it's a wider iron, then this system right here keeps it square for you because that bevel is referencing. But if it is not square, it's going to be tough to fix with this system. That's just from my experience with it. Other people could have a different experience. So if you have this, Maybe you don't have the pad down here and you're able to eyeball it and use the lines. Let us know down below. I don't like the idea of leaving the squareness up to me. I don't like the idea of me needing to think about that, especially when you're paying for something that's going to do it for you, or should be doing it for you because it's a jig. So when it comes to these two, these two, you don't have to worry about that. It squares it for you, and that's amazing. When it comes to the camber, if you do a true camber on an iron, the Mark II is the only one that can do that. If you just ease the corners or put a slight camber on it, then both of these two will be able to do that because you just put more pressure on one side than the other. So pressure here, sharpen, sharpen, pressure here, sharpen, sharpen, and that will ease the edges of it. But again, if you want a true dramatic camber, the Mark II is the only one that can do it. As far as micro bevels, so this is a huge perk in my opinion because I do micro bevels a lot. The Mark II can do micro bevels because on the wheels, they have these lines right here, and this like actually tilts the wheel slightly. So when you turn that and lock it in, that's a micro bevel. Turn it again, even steeper micro bevel. So the Mark II has that on both of its wheels that you can put micro bevels while it's already set up. It's already in it, it's already locked down. You just take this, twist it, and boom, you've got a micro bevel. The sharpening system also does the same thing. So see that right there. If you already have your iron clamped down, you're ready to do a micro bevel, boom, take that, turn it to the side, micro bevel done. The side clamping does not have that option. You can't just leave it clamped down, twist something, and turn it into a micro bevel. What you have to do is take it back to your registration jig. So you're going to have to build something like this for it. I'll get into that. But you'd put it up to your registration jig and you'd put a piece of paper or a piece of something there. So when you bump it up against it, it changes that angle slightly. But that means you have to unclamp it, set it up against this again, clamp it back down, and then go back to sharpening. I don't know that I would stress on that too much because if you are sharpening, I don't know if I'd say the normal way, but if you're sharpening, I guess, like the efficient way, you're doing a micro bevel anyway. So you're going to plan for that before you even clamp it down. This one, if you're going to use it to like change the primary and then do a micro bevel or a tertiary bevel or whatever, it's just easier to do it on these two than it is on the side clamping. So just kind of something to keep in mind. Now, I had mentioned the registration jig. When it comes to these two, the Mark II and the sharpening system, you do not need a registration jig because it's included. So this is the Mark II's, and then this piece is the registration jig for the sharpening system. This one, you need to make your own. So you can do something like this. That's just a registration stop, which means you put your iron in here, you bump this up against it, you clamp it down, and then that's at your 30 degrees. Or go to this one, bump the iron up against here, lock it down, that's your 25 degrees. The other way you can do it is just on, they provide you with this. So you can just do it on the paper, but it's a lot easier to have it as an actual stop. Push it up against there, push the iron, lock it down. So you will need to make a jig for this one, a registration jig. Now when it comes to like availability of the angles, what angles can they set? I would say that they're pretty much the same across the board because we can get into micro bevels. So if we're just going to look at the jig that you would build, the registration, and the registration, then obviously this one's going to do more. Because it has higher, lower, it does back bevels, it does all kinds of stuff like that. This one does 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. I don't know if you guys will be able to, there we go. So it has those different angles on there. Then this one is these angles. Upper and lower, you can do all of these different angles here. I really didn't want to even include this part because it's going to do what you need to do. I mean, if you're one of those people that gets super technical on angles and you want it to be like 17.5, you're going to struggle with any system you have. If you want the one that has the most angles, then I guess you could say the MK2 if you're going to stress on it that much. But in reality, all of them do the angles you're going to need for woodworking. When it comes to skewed irons, the side clamping cannot do skewed. The Mark II can do skewed if you buy this attachment, which if you have anything skewed and you're going with this system, I highly recommend it. This one can do skewed also, but it still comes down to the lines that are in here and you figuring it out yourself and making sure that you have it clamped down right and hoping that your bevel is already at the angle you need, and it's a little bit more difficult. So if you have a lot of skewed, automatically I'm going to say invest in the Mark II. When it comes to Mortice Chisels, I would recommend either the side clamping or the Mark II for Mortice Chisels. I didn't like how tall it was in this, and it only being a top clamping, because the Mortice Chisels are usually taller. Like they're thicker this way, okay? So for that, I prefer these two. If you are looking for the simplest, the easiest one to do, that's definitely going to be the side clamping, no question about it. Put the iron in, bump it up against your registration jig, clamp it down, you're good to go, okay? So that one is definitely the easiest. This one, there are a lot of parts to it, and there's a lot of things that you set up, but if you are just doing the same thing over and over again, which means you're just refreshing the micro bevel, you're probably going to have these two attached and this already set to the angle, to where you just clamp that on there and it's good to go. Once you learn it, it doesn't take long at all. I know people talk about, well, it's a ton of different parts and it's a lot of things to set up. It takes me 10 seconds because I've used it for a while. So don't stress on that. So this one I would say is the next easiest to set up. Now, that could also just be me because I struggle with this style of sharpening jig. So with this style, what you have to do, you take your iron, you put it bevel down into here. So you want to try to line that up and set it down. And then I'm going to try to do this while it's elevated. And then you hold the iron there. You then take this thing, slide it over it, bump it up against it until it meets that angle. See, right now I'm doing a micro bevel on it, and I don't want to do that. You should be able to just slide it up against there and clamp it down. That's what they say, but every time I do that, this time it worked. No, it didn't. It's doing a micro bevel. I don't know if you guys will be able to see that. So yeah, so this one I just struggle with. Again, it could just be me, but whenever I slide this in there and lock it down, it never goes to the exact angle that I want. I don't stress on angles too much, so it doesn't really bother me. I guess I'd rather keep it consistent. So I would use this one with a registration jig, or this one so I know it's at 25, so I know my micro bevels. This one's just going to be slightly off each time from what I've seen. But again, I don't stress on angles, so I know that's kind of like I'm talking against myself there, but I just struggle with this one. If you have this one, because I know I have a buddy, Steve, that uses this one and he has no issues at all. He loves it. He's used it forever. So maybe it's just me. If you have this one and like it, let us know. If you have this one and you run into the same issue I have, also let us know. Overall, here is where my opinion comes into the video. Please note, I am allowed my opinion. You are allowed your own. So if you agree with me or disagree with me, feel free to let us know down below. If you're just getting started in woodworking and you're not sure if you're going to like it, you don't want to invest a ton of money into a sharpening jig, I highly recommend the side clamping. I know there are cheaper ones on eBay or Amazon or whatever. I know there are cheaper ones out there, but this one is high quality and you don't have to modify it at all like some of the ones that you would have to on Amazon or eBay. There's YouTube videos about that. So this one's great for $46.50. The Mark II is my next recommendation. If you are ready to invest, or you want to just invest right away and you're even not sure if you're going to like woodworking, you just want a good sharpening system, this is my #1 recommendation, is the deluxe kit, and then the skew attachment if you have skewed, Mortice if you do Mortice Chisels. I love the Mark II. It is my favorite. Again, don't let all of the parts scare you. Once you learn it, it is really easy to set up. It's fast to set up and it's accurate, and it's just the most universal. You have a ton of different options with this. It's going to cover pretty much all of your sharpening needs, except for when it comes to small irons. This last one, I'm sorry, Steve, I'm not a fan of it. It could just be me because, like I said, he's used it for years and he loves it. I just never got this style to work right, where you tuck the blade under here and then you slide this up to it. I've just never been able to do that right. I do also want to note, I bought this from a friend. And this registration jig he built for this. So that kind of tells you something too. If you think that this system is going to work for you, then go for it. But again, he built a registration jig. You're going to have to build a registration jig with this one, and this one's cheaper. So I don't know that I can really recommend this one. Steve, you can yell at me in the comments. I'm sorry. So I hope this helped answer some of your guys' questions. Agree with me, disagree with me, picked one over the other, tried both of them out, all of them out, whatever. Have any questions, any comments, feel free to let us know down below. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this helped make a decision. I think I said that already. Have a good day.